All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to begin right away here. So in this first afternoon session, we are going to, Patrick Chambers is going to go over OEA, accountability and assessments. Then Brielle Glatzel is going to go over ESEA. Tanya Kurtz is going to go over school nutrition. And then Monica Treptow is going to go over the district library plan. And then, as I mentioned earlier, after this session, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to open up two breakout rooms, one for public, one for choice. And then for the rest of the afternoon, you'll be in one of those breakout rooms. And this does end at 3:30 today. So there'll be 50 more minutes of presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end of each session. But I am going to pass it over to Patrick Chambers, who's going to go over OEA.
Yeah, thank you. So I will also be joined by Dwayne Dorn. Dwayne is going to talk about the assessment side of things, and I will talk about report cards. So yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having us. Again, my name is Patrick Chambers. I'm on the accountability team here at TPI. We don't have much time, so I'm going to do a very high-level overview of school and district report cards. Going to keep things simple, but happy to answer any questions that you may have. So report cards, it's state law that every public school and district, this includes choice schools as well, receive a report card every year. If you've never seen a school or district report card, you can go online to our report card app and check them out. They are publicly available. The link to that app is here in the slides. You can also just search, Wisconsin report cards. They're pretty easy to find. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so this is the front page of an actual report card. You can see in the middle of the page, there's an overall score out of 100, an overall rating, and a number of stars, 1 to 5. At the top of the report card, there's information about the students within the school and the school itself. In the top right corner, there is an optional narrative statement that schools and districts can submit to just kind of talk about their school and give folks information that is, not otherwise known on a report card. In terms of where that overall score comes from, it comes from a weighted average of 4 priority areas. The first is achievement, which is performance on the statewide assessments. Growth, which is also based on performance on assessments over time. Target group outcomes, which is kind of like a mini report card for the lowest performing students at the school based on the last year's assessment results. And then finally, we have on track to graduation, which looks at absenteeism and attendance and graduation. There are other areas of the report cards as well that are found throughout the report card that are not scored. So, for example, we have course and program participation data for high school grades. There's third grade reading, percent proficient, that's found as well. And then there's certain state and local law violations that's reported for high school grades as well. And we can go to the next slide, please. In terms of when the report cards come out, they are released in the fall of the following school year. So in a couple months, we will have the 25-26 report cards will be coming out. The first release is a secure release that takes place in October. This is when schools and districts have the opportunity to look at their preliminary report cards, looking at non-redacted data. So because this data is not redacted, it could contain potentially identifiable information. These should never be shared publicly. You'll also get a chance to connect with our office and ask us questions about report cards and potentially correct data that needs to be that you may have submitted in error. And then there's a final release and a public release that take place in November. That's when the report cards, redacted versions of the report cards, go public. We do a news release. Districts often talk with their local media as well. That typically takes place in mid-November. We don't have the specific dates finalized yet, but once we do, we will post those to our website. If you are representing can we go back to the next slide? Back one, thank you. If you're representing a school that is new for this year, you receive your first report card in the fall of 2027. Again, the fall after the school year. If you're brand new, your first report card won't be scored because we need 2 years of having enough tested students in order to generate a report card score. You'll participate in a process called alternate accountability. And you get your first scored report cards in the fall of 2028. So make sure to put a save the date on your calendars for that. Next slide, please. In terms of what you should be thinking about now and what you can be doing in order to prepare for the report cards, I mentioned the narrative statement that goes at the top right corner of the front page. If you have an existing statement from last year and you want to make any changes to it, you can do so up until September 4th. If you had an existing statement and you just want to roll it over into the next year, you don't have to do anything. It'll automatically roll over. If you are a school that participates in alternate accountability, you'll need to submit a form to us. Don't worry about that if you don't participate. We contact every school that does participate in this. So if you've heard from us, there's some forms that you need to fill out for us. But most importantly, and this applies to everyone, I know you're going to be looking at a lot of presentations today and taking in a lot of content. I just want to emphasize how important it is, because the data that you submit through your student information system into WISE data, that's going to go onto those report cards, and that's going to show up in various areas in the front page and impact scoring. And these are all public resources that people pay a lot of attention to. So as you're listening to our various experts at DPI explaining the process for preparing for these data snapshots, submitting your data, it's really important because ultimately it's going to show up on these report cards. And if you're looking to learn more about the report cards themselves and how they work, definitely check out our report card resources page. We have a ton of different resources ranging from high-level overviews with graphics to, if you want to geek out and do some math, we have technical guides that explain all of the math involved as well. And if you think of questions, after I'm gone today that you want to know from us, please contact us. The best way to do that is our report card help@dpi.wi.gov inbox that is monitored by myself as well as a few other folks. So that's the best way to get a prompt response is to email report card help. And before I pass things over to Dwayne, are there any questions for me about report cards? Okay, well, if you think of anything, feel free to just pop them in the chat. Dwayne was chatting me. John, I don't know if Dwayne has.
Yeah, Dwayne, you there? You have access?
I have access, yes.
Okay.
Cool. Take it away, Dwayne.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dwayne Dorn on the Office Educational Accountability Team, and I'm going to talk about the assessment requirements for this coming school year. And primarily, I'll be focusing on how you'll be getting data into the testing portals. So go ahead, next slide. Before we get started on talking about getting the assessment data into the testing portals, I want to talk about what each district needs to have, which is a district assessment coordinator. That person will be primarily responsible for overseeing all aspects of the assessments. Which includes, obviously getting set up for them, the actual administration, and then the reporting afterwards. We communicate with those individuals on a regular basis throughout the school year. So if you oversee the SIS for your school district, this is a person that you will want to have familiarity with because you will need to be working with them on the variety of assessments, getting information into the testing portals. Next slide. Here we have listed the assessments that are required for all school districts across the state. And then as we go on to additional slides, let's talk in a little bit more detail about each assessment. So go ahead, next slide. Forward exam, this is our primary assessment for grades 3 through 8 in English language arts and mathematics, as well as grade 4 and 8 in science, grade 4 and 8 and 10 in social studies. This assessment is administered online in the spring of each school year. So we'll be starting this assessment in mid-March, mid to late March, and that'll go all the way through most of the end of April. Next slide. Student data in the Forward Exam portal. This one is the one that we use, our EdFi system, where we automatically will roster all students in January. This past school year, we rostered students in early January. This year, we anticipate rostering students in later January just because it's our second year of doing it this way, and we feel confident that we have the system up and running without hopefully too many hiccups. The big issue that districts will need to be aware of or will need to be in charge of is making sure your student information system is up to date throughout the testing window. But really, as we get started in January, you want to make sure that all your data is in there correctly so that when we load students, they're loaded correctly into the right grades and right districts and right everything. So when we do this loading of data, students will typically appear within about a day after we do the load. So then for any transfer students that show up in your districts, when those students transfer, you load them into your SIS. Those students will typically appear then in the testing portal within about 24 hours after being loaded into your SIS. And if they don't appear in the testing portal, that means something has gone wrong with your loading them into your SIS. And that's when you would want to contact the DPI help desk to see what might be going on. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Pre-ACT Secure, our online assessment for grades 9 and 10, also administered in the spring of each school year, starting earlier in March and then going through sometime in mid-April. 4 subject areas: English, reading, math, and science. Go ahead, next slide. We will do a one-time upload of student data into the pre-ACT testing portal. That will happen in late January. And then so for any students who are not part of that initial load, district will need to initiate a new enrollment request within the testing portal. So for that task, that's typically done by the person who is the assessment coordinator. So if you're overseeing the data for your school, you're going to need to communicate directly with your assessment coordinator when you have a new student arrive so that they can get that student added into the portal. All right, next slide. ACT with writing. 11th grade, this is administered via paper and pencil, or it's administered online. Spring of the school year. This one starts in early March and goes through mid-April. 5 subject areas: English, reading, math, science, and writing. Next slide. For this one, we have an additional step that occurs for this assessment, which is for students with accommodations. There's an additional portal. This is called the Test Accessibility and Accommodations portal, where each school district will need to load student data and the accommodations those students need into that portal. That portal will open in early September, and the deadline to add accommodations requests in that portal is late January. For these students, they're not just putting in this information for just the the spring testing date. It's really for any times that those students are planning on taking the ACT throughout the rest of their high school career. So this is a portal that, while you, if you're overseeing the SIS, might not be responsible for it, someone in your district will have that responsibility to make sure that this data gets entered for that student for any additional test administrations that they're wanting for an ACT test, be it a Saturday testing, which is typically how it's administered when it's not part of our state contract, which is the school day testing. Okay, next slide. Student data in the ACT testing portal is very similar to how it's done in the pre-ACT testing portal. We'll be loading students in late January. The one additional step is that schools will need to go in and verify whether they're testing their students via paper or whether they're testing via online administration. So when we put the students into the portal in late January, we typically give a handful of days for a school to verify the proper paper or online testing status. So that step will need to be done by the end of January as well. And it's important to be up to date on that one, especially if you're doing either testing, because we will ship test materials, basically test books, for any school that has identified that they plan on doing paper testing. So if you anticipate all of your students testing on paper, you're going to get a bunch of materials. But if you plan on testing online, but you indicate that you're testing via paper, you're also going to receive a bunch of materials. And I think most schools would not want to have a bunch of extra materials show up, because then they have to figure out how to get those shipped back. So new enrollments, transfer requests. This is also similar to how it's done in the pre-ACT portal. Basically, the DAC is going to need to go into the portal, add the information about the student that needs to get transferred onto the roster, and that will happen so that happens within the testing portal. All right, next slide. Dynamic learning maps. This is the assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities from grades 3 all the way through grade 11 for ELA, math, science, and social studies. For this assessment, also administered online, spring of the school year, basically the same testing window as we have for the forward exam. Next slide. For this assessment, each district is responsible for loading students themselves into the educator portal, that's the testing portal, at any time between August and the end of February. So this one, DPI does not handle loading the students. The school district themselves is responsible for loading the students into this portal. And then for transfers, there's a feature within that transfer, within the educator portal, to allow a student to get moved onto a roster throughout the testing window. And then WIDA Access, this is for English learning students from kindergarten through grade 12. This test is also administered almost exclusively online, except for kindergarten students. So this assessment begins in December of each school year and goes through January. So this one's the first test that's required. And so next slide, we'll have a little bit of information about how we get students loaded there. So DPI will do a preliminary upload in early October. We then will allow districts a 2-week window of opportunity to look through the portal to verify the information is accurate, and then upload a final roster. DPI will then upload a final roster in preparation for shipping materials. For this assessment's a little bit unique for any choice schools that are participating, or any private schools that are participating in this assessment. The choice school, the private school, will need to work with the district within their boundaries about getting their students loaded into the portal. So this one, for choice schools, you work directly with the school district that you're part of, and they will assist with making sure that all of your students who are taking the assessment have access. And then for any student transfers within this testing portal, there's a feature for districts to complete a transfer request form, and that will allow students to get moved from one district to the other. That's pretty much the extent of the slides that I have. Any questions? DPI, I'm forgetting what our email address is. It's oea@dpi.wi.gov for any questions you may have about any of the assessment requirements. Or feel free to give any of us on the assessment team a call directly. If you go to our website, we all have our contact information out there on the website. All right, that's about it.
All right. So we have Patrick and Dwayne. You guys are all done. Okay.
I am finished. I believe Patrick is
Yep.
finished as well.
Unless there's any other questions for us.
We do have a question from Cynthia. Could we have them sync after the second Friday count report being due?
Is that for spring assessments? I guess is what she's asking. I assume that's what she's asking about when the data gets synced. For the forward exam.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know when we'll load, if we might load before that second count date, but we will be able to get everything synced up afterwards. So even if data goes in and then there's some changes are made, all that data should get pushed through within a day after those changes being made, because we will be going through on a couple times during the week and looking into our data warehouse and pulling that data into the testing portal for the forward exam.
All right, great. Thank you, Patrick and Dwayne. We appreciate it. I am now going to pass it over to Brielle Glatzel, who's going to do an ESEA overview.
Hello, hi everybody. My name's Brielle Glatzel, as you were just told. I am a federal fiscal monitoring consultant here at the agency. I work on the Bureau of, Bureau of Grant Administration and Monitoring. I do many things, like I'm sure many of you do, but one of them is I specialize around grant management and fiscal monitoring, but then also kind of narrowing in with the lens of ESEA. So I'm going to talk with you all a little bit around ESEA, just giving a nice little introduction around that, providing some of a little bit of that overview of those different ESEA title grants, including some of the intent and purpose that are ingrained within the law and statutes that regulate the funding, help you understand get a better understanding of the overarching components that help kind of ground ESEA together. And then just as part of that continuation, provide some more content around those or context around those specific titles, all the way from Title I Part A to Title V. And then there is, it is technically a different act, but it is umbrellaed under ESEA, and that's the McKinney-Vento Act. And we'll talk about that too. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we'll just start by introducing the fact of like how ESEA ultimately came to be, or the purpose behind it. Oh, is this a repeat? Might be a repeat. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Sorry. Ultimately, the ESEA was most recently reauthorized in December of 2015 under ESSA. So you may hear it referred to as ESEA, ESSA. Primarily, a lot of the documentation, technical assistance, and even applications and things that we have reference ESEA, because that is the founding act, the founding law, and then like ESSA, what is the latest reauthorization. Before that, it was NCLB. But ultimately, the purpose behind ESEA itself and then these reauthorizations is this idea of it being a civil rights law. It's really about offering funding to give opportunities to districts, to the subrecipients, to be able to best support students and those who are the marginalized youth, in particular, students who have maybe potentially come from low-income families or even special populations, as some of the other title grants do touch upon. And we'll go into that in a little bit of detail. But it really is grounded in this idea of providing equal opportunity or providing opportunity to give these students access to education. The next slide. And that kind of is just grounded again here further of this idea of educational equity. It is really about providing all children significant opportunity for a fair, equitable, and high quality education, for closing those educational achievement gaps, for allowing them to ultimately be able to perform and meet those state academic standards. So that is really ultimately where there is an connecting thread throughout all of that ESEA funding, and it's grounded in really trying to provide opportunities for all children to receive that fair, equitable, and high quality education. Slide. And so something to keep in mind when it comes to that educational equity piece, it doesn't mean It doesn't mean potentially all students having the exact same sort of access or at the same time, but it's actually about focusing on making sure that those students that do have some of those different areas of needs and focuses are receiving those resources and that rigor that they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of race, gender, identity, or ethnicity, language, ability, and sexual orientation, family background. This is something that is also, near and dear to DPI's mission. And so there's a lot of connection between things that we have and rhetoric around what we're trying to do as an agency, but also like the ESEA intent and purpose too, of just really trying to push forward with this educational equity and how that funding can be utilized to support students and marginalized youth. Go to the next slide, sorry. So when it comes down to it, ESEA is broken up into different sections called titles. So you'll often hear ESEA title grants or the title grants. In total, there are 9 titles, but ultimately we at DPI have funds that are awarded out to LEAs under 6 of those specific titles. And so the most common that you might hear of are Title I, and under Title I, there's multiple parts. So there's Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV also has multiple parts. There's a Title V, which for some reason is that last one that is not showing. And then the McKinney-Vento Act, which is available to support youth experiencing homelessness. So those are kind of those different supportive funding streams that we receive at DPI and award to LEAs under ESEA. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So under Title I, there are a couple of parts. The first one is Part A. This is primarily the main title. When people refer to Title I, this is probably the one that most people are referring to or thinking about. The purpose of Title I is to provide all children with a significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education and to close those educational achievement gaps. So you can see right here, it really aligns very, very closely with that ESEA purpose statement we just talked about. This is ultimately where there is a lot of flexibility around the funding as long as it directly addresses the needs of those students in pursuing their education achievement. So it's meant to be targeted to high poverty school districts. That's how the funding ultimately is made available to school districts. It is based off of poverty data, but then it is meant to be utilized to support and address the greatest needs within those districts' public school buildings. It's meant to provide supplemental education, so not to support general education, but to provide services and benefits above and beyond for students that, again, are educationally disadvantaged or at risk of failing to meet those state standards. When it comes to Title I, Part A, we do have more than one main contact. We have multiple reviewers and consultants who support districts. So we do have a consultant directory. I believe at this point in time, we have about 7 who support all of the different LEAs across the state who receive this funding. So ultimately, when you have questions around this one, it's best to contact and look at who your point of contact would be to have those conversations with them, and they can kind of help support you, whether it be a question around like, is this an allowed cost, or hey, I just kind of have more general questions around Title I. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So under Title I, there are additional parts, as I mentioned. The first one is Part C that we'll go ahead and talk about, and this is the Title I Part C Migrant Education Program. You might also have heard of something referred to as MEP. The mission of the MEP program is to provide migratory students supplemental instructional services to support their academic success and to help them receive support that they will need to succeed. This is a program that is actually DPI is the fiscal agent, but we work within regions and ultimately with CESAs to support those regions to provide support to migratory students and their families. It's primarily run in the summer, but it is a program that does have a very specific purpose for supporting a specific population of students. Kind of in a similar manner, we have Title I-D. Title I-D, also referred to as the Neglected and Delinquent Program. This is a program that supports yet another specialized population of students who have potentially been or are in attendance at neglected, delinquent, and or at-risk programs, facilities, institutions across the state. And it is meant to give them the same sort of opportunities that students in other Title I programs in public school buildings would have opportunities for receiving. So it is still meant to be supplemental funding, but made available to those youth that potentially are not currently receiving education within the public school setting. They might be within a different sort of facility and still receiving education, but this is giving that flexibility for those facilities and institutions to still provide supplemental services. And you'll see here the contact, they have the specific contacts. Oh, you're fine, you can go ahead. We then have Titles 2 and 3. Title 2 is ultimately where there is a little bit more narrowed scope of intent and purpose. It is still meant to ultimately focus in on improving educational outcomes for students, but it does it from the lens of supporting the SEA and LEAs in increasing student achievement through high quality instruction and supporting creating and helping teachers to become effective teachers and school leaders. So it really is through this lens of professional learning opportunities, high quality professional development. So utilizing federal funds to really drive home supporting getting staff the professional learning opportunities that they need to improve the quality and effectiveness of their strategies and their instructional supports. Title III is yet another funding source that is meant to serve a specific sort of student population. It is meant to support English learners and also immigrant children and youth, and it has a focus of helping them to attain English proficiency, and then also help them to develop high levels of academic achievement within English. So Title II's consultant is Abdallah Bendada, and then Title III's consultant is Amy Michelik. So they both support those grants for all LEAs, and they would be your main point of contact for those two grants. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So Title IV, this is actually Title IV Part A. This is meant to improve student academic achievement by increasing the capacity of the state, and in particular the LEA, in 3 priority areas. So that would be access to well-rounded education, improving school conditions for learning to ensure safe and healthy students, and effective use of technology to improve academic achievement and digital literacy. So we see this shortened as well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and educational technology. Those are the 3 primary or priority areas under Title IV Part A. Something to keep in mind is when it comes to safe and healthy students, it doesn't just mean a physical safety, which is still something that can be addressed. It can also expand out and include things like mental health, social emotional health, behavioral health, all of those pieces. It is what is necessary for a student to physically and mentally, emotionally be prepared and able to receive education and thrive in that environment. And so the consultant for that is Karen Horn, and she, again, is kind of similar to 2 and 3, is the consultant for all LEAs across the state. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then we have Title V. Title V is ultimately made available under the Rural Education Achievement Program. It is meant to support unique needs of rural schools. And there is one part of it that there's 2 parts of it, but ultimately the one that we want to kind of highlight is the fact that there are a small set of LEAs that do actually receive Title V funding that provides quite a bit of flexibility to these eligible rural schools, and that the use of funds for or under Title V is any of the activities that are authorized by the other titles that I just mentioned. So we have Title I, improving those basic programs, Title II, supporting effective instruction, Title III, focusing on supporting English learners, and then Title IV, that student support and academic enrichment, kind of that more comprehensive lens. So Title V ultimately is giving LEAs who qualify additional funding to support initiatives in any of those areas. I think this year we only had about 15 LEAs that were eligible. So it is a smaller sort of grant, but it is one that is around and it can provide some really great flexibilities if you are eligible. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So like I mentioned, it's umbrellaed under ESEA, but there is also a additional act that is connected to it. So this is the McKinney-Vento Act. We often refer to it as the Education for Homeless Children and Youth grant, but it's ultimately a program that's listed under McKinney-Vento Act, and that's where we get the grant from. This is meant to address the needs of students that are experiencing homelessness across our LEAs and throughout the state. It is meant to support homeless liaisons, which every LEA is required to have a homeless liaison, and it helps to distribute funds from the U.S. Department for this particular initiative of supporting these this specific student population. We do have Christine Adelsky, who is the homeless coordinator for the state, and she's supported by Clara Pfeiffer. So those would be your contact if you do have questions around the grant opportunities, or even, again, because there are specific requirements on how you support students experiencing homelessness. If you have questions pertaining to that, they would be great resources. When it comes to ESEA and ultimately even just federal grants, but really kind of narrowing in on ESEA, there are some cross-cutting requirements. So we have, the grant period, LEA plans, reporting, private school equitable participation, maintenance of effort, supplement not supplant, and ESEA monitoring. All of these themselves can be probably an hour-long presentation. So I'm just going to provide like a very short introduction to all of them to kind of help ground us all in these cross-cutting requirements and how they connect across the titles. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the grant period is ultimately based off of, for us, the state fiscal year, so Wisconsin state fiscal year. So what it is it starts on July 1st and it ends June 30th. This is when the period of performance is going to be for all of these grants. This means that the grant is going to begin on July 1st and it's going to end on June 30th. All of our title funding aligns with our state's fiscal year. It also means that's when your expenditures have to align. So you are able to begin obligating from July 1st, and then you have to have those obligations completed by June 30th in order for them to be applicable to the specific fiscal year or the grant's period of performance. Those funds must be obligated within that grant's period of performance to be applied to that grant in that fiscal year. We do have a resource linked here, and I know the slide deck is made available for helping to understand more around obligating and liquidating funds, because again, that can be a topic all of its own. So that is a really great resource to help better ground kind of how the fiscal year and grant period kind of tied together. Next slide. When it comes to ESEA, and especially in the reauthorization under ESSA, there is a requirement that LEAs receiving funds from at least 2 or more titles have a consolidated LEA plan within their ESEA programs. There are specific criteria and elements that need to be basically responded to by these LEAs or included within their LEA plans. That speaks to how they are meeting different sort of criteria, how they are ultimately utilizing federal funds to address needs, how they are conducting assessments with and conducting assessments and engaging with the community and other stakeholders. So there's a handful of things that all kind of wrap into it to make sure that there is authentic processes and planning going into how these federal dollars are being utilized, and to help try to identify a more comprehensive plan for how these funds come together. This is something that on an annual basis right now within the system, when you go to start your applications, it will populate the prior year's responses and say, hey, is this current? what we have on file is your LEA plan responses. Is this current, or have you guys made adjustments based off of changes to what you're doing in this upcoming year? And if so, can you make adjustments to that before you start your application? The other piece that we do have is there's connections between the LEA plan and then ultimately data that gets submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, as well as some additional questions. And that is where we have a ESEA end of year report. That end of year report is open right now within WISE Grants for supporting the 25-26 applications. So that's getting, LEAs are in the process of submitting that right now. Once that timeline has passed, we will compile all of that data and then we will send it off to the Department of Education so that they can review it and look at it to kind of garner information as far as it pertains to ESEA funding and those different title grants. The next slide. Under ESEA, there is a provision in the law that requires LEAs to meet with and consult with private schools should they have any within their boundaries. And ultimately around this, they are required to consult with those private schools around the idea of equitable services for private school students, their teachers, and their families. And programs that are available under the Act. So in particular, this, would really zero in on like Title I, II, III, and IV. This gives the private schools an opportunity through that consultation process to say either, yes, we agree and would love to receive services, or no, this is not something that we are interested in. But it is meant to be a process between the LEA and the private school to make that determination. So this is meant to happen on an annual basis. There are some LEAs that do not have any private schools within their boundaries, and so they don't have this particular requirement. But should they ever get a private school that does pop up in their boundaries, they would be required then to go through this process with them. For those LEAs that do have those private schools, and in particular have private schools that are participating, it is important that something that is constantly maintained, but also discussed and understood by both the LEA and the private school, is that these federal funds are essentially, they are granted to the LEA. They're not granted ever to the private school. The funds remain in the name of the LEA. The LEA is the fiscal agent and is providing equitable services. So the private school cannot receive those federal dollars or even obligate them. It is the private school students and the staff are ultimately receiving benefits and services that are provided and maintained by the LEA. When it comes to that consultation process, because it needs to be supportive of being able to provide services for a school year and ultimately being able to start as soon as possible or align with the school year with as soon as like a public school services start. We talk about consultation being timely and meaningful. So really wanting to make sure that those conversations are happening in a timely manner so that there's not a delay to when those services can happen. Also meaningful, making sure that it is a two-way conversation, making sure that it's this idea of both the private school and LEA coming to the table, having the ability to have a voice and be able to feel that their opinions are being heard and that they are given valuable input. We do have a contact for equitable participation, and that information is right there. It's the ESSA Ombudsman. Every state is required to have an ESSA Ombudsman to be a mediator, to be an informant, to just provide support around equitable participation, both to the district and to private schools. I actually also serve as the ESSA Ombudsman. Like I said, we all wear many hats, but rather than my email, if you could use this email, the ESSA Ombudsman one, if you ever do want to connect around any of this. Slide. There is a maintenance of effort requirement under ESEA. It's not as popular or well known, I think, as the IDEA one. This is done on a year-to-year basis. It's an analysis that is done to review how LEAs are maintaining consistent level of non-federal funding to support their public education. So basically, we at DPI, we do this utilizing data that we receive through all of the different sort of WISE systems that we have to identify how much state and local funds are being used to support public education, right? Like I had mentioned earlier, The title funding is not really meant to provide that general education. It is meant to be supplemental. So this is kind of one of those checks and balances that exist. Ultimately, you're only going to hear from us if you fail maintenance of effort. And there's a whole bunch of different tests and things that, and the calculation that goes into it that I'm not going to cover. But you would only hear from us if you had failed and if there were concerns around that. And that would be because if you ultimately do not pass, there is a concern of you receiving your full allocation of ESEA funds in the next fiscal year. So if you are, if the LEA is not passing the maintenance of effort, we're going to be reaching out to you and we're going to be working with you to see if there's adjustments and things that can be made. I've been in this position for 8 years and we have never had to do that. So I think, we've been pretty lucky in that regard. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. And just kind of a continuation of that is the supplement, not supplant provision. So this is a provision that is honestly ingrained across most federal grants. There's just variances across the grants on how it is tested. ESEA in a similar manner, it's really that idea that the funding is meant to go above and beyond the state and local resources for educational funding. So that general, it's meant to say, hey, there are state statutes that kind of define what you as an LEA, as a school, have to have in place and be able to provide. You can't use federal funding for this. And so it's basically acknowledging like your ESEA funding cannot be used to supplant, replace your state and local resources for those core educational funding pieces and components. They do supplement, not supplant provision does vary across some of the titles. Title I is unique. Title II and Title IV have the same supplement, not supplant provision. And basically that means the overarching idea of supplement, not supplant is the same. It's the test, the way that we demonstrate compliance with supplement, not supplant, that is different. So Title I is unique. Title II and Title IV are exactly the same. Title III is primarily the same as 2 and 4, but it has one additional layer to it. So this would be one, if you have questions and concerns around it, I am always happy to connect on it. Or you can also reach out to some of the specific title consultants. But it is one, the core of it is, again, funding is meant to be supplemental. It's not meant to replace your state and local resources. Next slide. When it comes to it, monitoring, DPI as an SEA has oversight responsibilities to ensure compliance of ESEA grant programs, also with uniform grant guidance. So we do have processes for identifying specific LEAs for different levels of monitoring. We do have a baseline universal monitoring process where we have LEAs on a 5-year cycle. We do have a targeted approach. Our best known targeted approach is probably would be equitable participation. And then we have a more comprehensive monitoring. The thing to know with all of this is it's when LEAs are selected for these processes, it's not because an LEA has done something wrong. It simply means that either one, it's on a cohort cycle, or if there was one where there is risk assessment happening, it's where we've identified that, hey, maybe there's some an area of growth and potentially some support that we can provide to help better support the district and get things moving along in the appropriate manner. Next slide. So just wanting to be able to cover what is happening right now. This is particular for LEA. So if you are representing a private school, you might be connecting with your LEA partners around planning for, having had plans around some of your title services. And then that's something that they're going to take back and put into their applications. So as of right now, we have received and do have calculated final allocations for Title I Part A, Part D, for Title II, and for Title IV A, and I believe also B. They are available on this linked on this webpage. And the other thing I can add is Title III is not listed there. We are in the process of trying to finalize Title III. We are just kind of looking at some of the access testing data, kind of just finalizing some of that will then be used for those allocations. And then the Title I Part 1 or Part A and Part D applications, as well as 2 and 4 are all open. So if you are subrecipients of any of those grants, they are available in WISE grants for the 26-27 year. They're available for you to be able to start working on, submitting. The due date for those are August 31st. And as I mentioned earlier, that ESEA end of year report that supports the 25-26 year is now open and also has a report or has a due date of August 31st. And then just with the kind of a friendly reminder of this idea of, even though we definitely firmly, I would say probably have both feet in 26-27, if you are still in the process of kind of trying to close out and clean up 25-26, there is still the ability to obligate some of those funds between July 1st to September 30th. And then also that would be in the current year, but also going back into 25-26 and getting your final claims kind of cleaned up and finished up. But the time to get all of that done is quickly escaping us since it's already August 18th. So that's something you want to have on your radar. So these are just some really great resources that help promote equity because, again, there is that firm underlining connection of educational equity across ESEA. So these are some modules, some e-courses, and some facilitator guides. I'm getting all tongue-tied, sorry. Specific to that sort of initiative. And then I think we have one more slide, maybe. Yep, that just includes like staff contacts. So again, we have one specific to Title I, and then for the other grant contacts, you're looking at one contact per title. But always happy to help with questions, especially as it's application season. As you're filling those out, it's best to connect with your consultants and get any questions answered.
Awesome. Thank you, Brielle.
Yeah.
I am now going to pass it over to Tanya Kurtz, who's going to go over school nutrition.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. That was really interesting, by the way. It's been a while since I brushed up on some of the things you just covered. So it was always enlightening to hear colleagues amongst us in our building talk about what they do. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking to you all a little bit more about school nutrition, the programs that we offer, and some of the other important parts that you guys should all be aware of. So I'm just going to kick it off by discussing some of the programs we offer at DPI. So DPI is the state agency that oversees the USDA child nutrition programs. This list on the slide isn't inclusive. There are a few additional ones as well that aren't listed here, but most commonly people are aware of the National School Lunch Program, also referred to as the NSLP. We also offer the School Breakfast Program, or SBP. We have an after-school snack program. We also have a program that's not on the slide called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. We also offer the Special Milk Program, and the Special Milk Program is a program for students that do not have access to meals. So this would be a program that would be for half-day kiddos. For example, like some schools still do like 4K half-day, 3K half-day. So it'd be available for them. That, and we have about 150 schools that participate in the Special Milk Only program. So they do not provide meals through the National School Lunch Program and just offer special milk. We also have the Seamless Summer option, which is one of our summer feeding options where in low income areas, children can have access to free meals when school is out. We also do the Summer Electronic Benefit Transfer Program, or Summer EBT, and that's a partnership with the Department of Health Services. I do have a slide about that program in particular a little later on when I'm talking. And then our sister bureau, the Bureau of Community Nutrition, they offer the Child and Adult Care, it should be Safe Food Program. It's a Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, and that's for child care centers. And then they also offer the Summer Food Service Program, otherwise known as SFSP, which is very similar to SSO, where it's based mainly in lower income neighborhoods where all children are able to eat for free when school is out. So that's a pretty big list of what we do here. I will mention one Wisconsin-based program that is not on here because it's not something that the USDA offers, but we here in the state of Wisconsin also have something called the Wisconsin School Day Milk Program. And that is a program that was passed many years ago by the state, and they offer a reimbursement for milk served like at milk break. Sometimes it's offered in the morning, sometimes it's offered in the afternoon, and it's for children that are eligible for free reduced price meals. They can receive, the school can receive a reimbursement for milk served for preschool all the way up to 5th grade for that program. All right, so I know you're all very familiar with the term LEA, and when we're talking about school nutrition, we refer to schools as SFAs or school food authorities, because once you sign your school nutrition contract with us, you are agreeing that you are going to be overseeing those programs. So if you want to know more about the school nutrition requirements, there are 2 very different resources I have here on this slide for you. The first one is the permanent agreement / policy statement. This is something for those of you that like to get into the real details or the nitty gritty of all the different requirements. Every year when whoever at your school, if you do participate in our programs, every year when they submit your new school nutrition online contract, they are agreeing to everything in that permanent agreement. That agreement also lays out our responsibilities here at DPI and what we agree to do for you and how we agree to do things as well as what you do. If you are interested in learning more about the requirements for our programs, but don't want to, take the time to read through the permanent agreement, we do have a very high-level, self-paced course. It's right here on the slide, and it's just called Getting Started in USDA Child Nutrition Programs, and it gives a really nice overview of program requirements, because I'm sure it becomes to no surprise to any of you that when receiving federal funds, obviously there's a lot of different requirements involved in that. All righty. So to kind of piggyback on what I was just discussing, this is a very important resource that we have, and it's called the Calendar of Program Requirements. It is basically the most comprehensive document of all the tasks involved with participating in our child nutrition programs. It is really meant to be printed off and can be used as a checklist. And I've seen these in some schools when I've gone out and done administrative reviews where people actually do keep it in a binder and check things off. It really goes into detail about when things are due and resources for doing those things. Something I do recommend to schools that do participate in our programs is that you actually sit down with whoever is going to be responsible for parts and pieces of participation in our programs and look at the calendar of program requirements together, and then assign those tasks based on what your roles are within the school, so that you can ensure that you don't miss any of the important things that are required of program participation. And you heard me a few slides back when I was talking about the permanent agreement, talking a little bit about the school nutrition contract. That is housed in our school nutrition online services portal. This is also where claims for reimbursement for participating in our programs are submitted as well. So on that first slide, I was talking about the National School Lunch Program. That's one claim that's submitted monthly. The school breakfast program is a separate claim that's submitted. After school snack. Those are all submitted here. And we did include some information on the slide about login information for online services. It's an extremely common question we get on our team, that people don't know how to log in because somebody maybe has left. So we just have this information here in case any of you right now are thinking, I'm not sure how I get in or not sure how to do that. So our accountant, Jackie Darrow, she is the person that can reset that for you if need be. All right. So if you've ever wondered about payments that you've received from DPI, and in particular, sometimes people are confused about the payments they get through our bureau at School Nutrition here. The AIDS Register is a very useful tool that you can go to, and you can view all payments made to your school food authority if you participate in our programs right there. Payments are processed on Tuesdays. So today, for example, was a claims day where they were processing payments in this morning. And they're viewable in the AIDS register the following Friday, and then they're deposited the next Monday. So it's a really good way to double check and make sure that you've received reimbursement. If you ever have any questions about anything you see in there, you're not sure, you can just reach out to somebody on our team, and we'd be more than happy to help you figure that out. Okay, so I was asked to speak just briefly about free and reduced price meal eligibility. Eligibility for free or reduced price meals is the responsibility of the determining official who's listed on the school nutrition online contract that you'd have with us. Students can be directly certified for free or reduced price meals. They may have an approved household application or be other source categorically eligible. So those other source categorically eligible kiddos are students who are foster, homeless, migrant, or runaway. We have all sorts of resources to help understand free and reduced meal eligibility, because there's a lot of different requirements and a lot of nuances to this part of our program. We offer in-person trainings, we've done virtual live trainings, we've done asynchronous trainings related to eligibility. So we have a bunch of information on our training webpage, as well as if you have any questions regarding eligibility, those can be sent to the email address on the slide, the DPI meal eligibility inbox. I used to monitor that inbox. We get quite a few really good questions in there about processing meal applications or what to do if you receive something you're not sure exactly what it, from a household and you're not exactly sure what they mean. So they can definitely help you there with any of those questions. Or of course, we do have our main line that can always be called, and the person that answers that line will always forward you to the appropriate person on our team that can assist you. And as I mentioned earlier, I said we were going to circle back to summer EBT. Summer EBT is my where I spend most of my time these days. And summer EBT is a program. It's a federal program authorized 2024. It built upon the success of pandemic EBT. If any of you remember that, PEBT is what it was called, and that became during COVID when students weren't able to eat meals at school. They were trying to figure out a way to ensure that those children that were qualified for free and reduced price meals weren't missing out on nutritious foods. So summer EBT basically is like a food share like benefit. It provides $120 per eligible student in the summer to help households purchase groceries when nutritious school meals are not available. It's a very successful and important program for a lot of households. We put this together because we knew there's going to be quite a bit talking about WISE in this today. And we wanted just to mention that there's parent guardian demographic data is optional reporting field in WISE, but it is used to issue summer EBT benefits to eligible students across the state. So any student who had a free or reduced price meal designation and did not, is not at a community eligibility or CEP school should have automatically received summer EBT without needing to apply. But unfortunately, in summer 2026 here in Wisconsin, we had approximately 30,000 students that were reported in WISE with a free or reduced price meal eligibility, and we were unable to disperse the benefit in a timely manner because we didn't have the information on file to do so. So that's just a little plug from our team to any of you that do anything with WISE reporting to maybe reconsider putting that demographic data in to WISE because it can help get a household a benefit much quicker. We are able to issue them eventually, but it does take a lot more time and sometimes, requires some outreach. It also requires sometimes a little bit of work from schools because you have parents reaching out to you wondering why they didn't get the benefit. So that is just something very helpful for us as well. And I believe that was my last slide.
All right, great. Thanks, Tanya.
Yep.
All right, let me share my screen here, and then Monica Treptow is going to go over district library plan.
Great. Thank you. All right. I am going to keep this pretty short today. I know you've been in front of a screen for a really long time. And in the morning session, I know there was a slide about the district library plans. So this is sort of building on that information that was already provided for you. And as a school library consultant, I work primarily with the district librarians on this, but I also tend to work with the folks that are entering the data just because of how that system works and that the librarians are not the ones putting in the data to the WISE admin portal. So the district library plan, as you may have recalled from this morning, has been around actually as a required piece of legislation since 1974. But we have very recently, within the last 3 years, have decided to put it in the WISE admin portal as a data collection point because we had a really low participation rate and we had a very ineffective way of keeping track of our district library plans. So we are really happy with the progress we've made over the last couple of years. As you can see on the slide, this is a collaborative process. We've got our library media specialists that are creating the plans, collaborating with their colleagues on building the plan, making sure that it aligns with the district values and also the district priorities. Then it goes in front of the school board where it needs to be approved, not just read to them, not just as an information point, but actually approved. And then after all of that is done, the information gets entered into the WISE admin portal, which is done by the district administrator or whomever that district administrator assigns the role of data entry. Right now, we have 78% of our districts that are currently working on approved and implemented plans. Some of the things that I see when people are submitting that are like the return button gets hit is if the links don't work, because we do ask for a link to your library plan as well as a link to the board approved minutes. Now that latter link is not required, but I do need to share that we need to see that the plan has been board approved in order for us to approve it. So if you don't provide the link, we will search it out online, or if we cannot find it online, we will send you an email and ask you for a copy of those minutes. So just so you know, it's optional to enter the data, but of course, it is required to approve the plan. And then the next point I want to make is that we recommend a plan length of 2 to 3 years. Anytime we get beyond that, the plans become ineffective because, quite frankly, we have so many changes with technology and district happenings that it's very hard to foresee out into a future much further than that. However, we cannot mandate that the plan is 2 or 3 years long. Therefore, you have drop-down windows where you're allowed to choose up to 5 years. It's not recommended to choose 5 years, but some districts do it. And also, if that is chosen, it needs to be reflected in the plan. So the plan itself is the priority document. So we will be looking at the plan, and if the librarian has written a 3-year plan, but the data is entered as a 5-year plan, it will get returned and will ask you to amend the implementation years. So I think that those two things, the implementation years as well as the board approval minutes, are the two reasons that things wind up back in districts and being asked to revise. I also want to mention that when you revise, you should just modify the document, the same piece of data that's been sent back to you. Don't create a new data entry point. The new entries should only be used when you're changing plans, which we will be doing for a lot of districts in the next year, where people are going to be entering their second round of submitting their library plans. So they will have a district record going, and then you will need a new entry for a revised plan, just not when a plan is returned to you for adjustments. So that is what I have. I wanted to keep it short because I know you guys have been in front of screens a long time. On the school library website for DPI, you'll find my contact information and a way to email or call me if you have additional questions. But I always recommend first going to your librarian, and then they will ask me, or you can collaborate together to find the answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica. All right, so we are now going to take a short 5-minute break. So we're going to reconvene at 2:15. I am going to turn on the breakout rooms. So if you are a choice school, please join the choice breakout room. Public, please join the public. All right, we will talk to you all in 5 minutes.